Welcome to Access Rhode Island and its program Kids Count. My name is Elizabeth Burke Bryant and I'm Executive Director of Rhode Island Kids Count, a children's policy and advocacy organization that works to improve the health, education, safety, and economic well-being of Rhode Island's 225,000 children. Today's program is on a very important topic and an exciting one, which is how do we care for children in the care of DCYF in the best possible way that will make it much more likely that our children and youth will reach their full potential. And I'm delighted that the guest on our program for this program is my colleague, Lisa Galette. Lisa, it's great to see you.
Hi, nice to see you too.
Lisa Galette is Executive Director of Foster Forward. And maybe, Lisa, we can start out by talking to our viewing audience about what Foster Forward is and what it does.
Sure. Foster Forward is a statewide nonprofit organization that works with children and youth in foster care, young adults who've aged out of the foster care system, and supports the foster families who care for them.
Excuse me, and when we say foster families, what do you mean by the term foster families? It's been a little bit of a changing term. Certainly, I know over the years I've worked at Rhode Island Kids Count that there's no group of people that I admire more that truly put children first and step up for children. So maybe if you can explain a little bit about what that term means.
Sure. So in Rhode Island, when children have experienced abuse or neglect and it's determined that they can't stay with their parents, we have temporary caregivers known as foster parents. They could be kinship caregivers, so they might be someone who is a relative or a close friend of the family of the child who steps up to help care for that child temporarily, or it could be a volunteer who's been vetted and gone through extensive training and support to become a foster parent. And they're available to take a child at any hour and care for them for as little as a night or maybe as long as several months, up till about a year or more if the parents need more time to successfully get their children back. And if the parents aren't able to successfully reunify, many of our foster families also consider becoming adoptive parents.
And just generally speaking, I know in the Kids Count Fact Book we track the number of children and youth in the care of DCYF, and there were a little over 2,000 indicated cases of abuse and neglect, but those all don't require foster families to step up. Some of them remain in the home, and there are other things that happen to those children. Do you know offhand about how many foster parents there are in Rhode Island right now, both kinship and other foster parents?
It fluctuates a little bit, but between 800 and 900 families are in service at any given point in time.
I know that in terms of the landscape, we just did an issue brief a few months ago on young children in the care of DCYF, and it was very striking to many readers that a full 1,485 young children under age 6 were in the care of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families just in the year 2015 alone. I think what we do know about where those children are is that young children, more than the older youth, tend to be in family settings when they are removed for a period of time from their biological families. But the problem has been with trying to recruit people who will step up to be foster parents for older youth, and by that I mean middle and high school aged children as opposed to younger children. Have you found that to be an issue?
Absolutely, Elizabeth. I am the parent of 2 teens, and I think for years going to different fairs and opportunities in the community and trying to recruit foster parents for teenagers, it can be a tough sell. People are struggling with their own teens sometimes, or they have misconceptions about who these kids are. We have so many children and youth in our system through no fault of their own, and while they have experienced some trauma because of abuse and neglect, there's a lot of support for them. And I think people don't realize that we have honor roll students. We had a 13-year-old girl a couple of weeks ago, and the foster mom was telling me she was an honor roll student and she just needed a home with a family. And we have so many teens that end up in group care in Rhode Island where we don't want them to be. We know that the best place for a young person who's experiencing that disruption with their family is to be with another family who can really ensure that they have normalcy, that they have continuity with their education, and stay connected to their community and their neighborhood of origin and their friends.
Well, and I know that there's a lot of efforts underway at DCYF right now to really turn the tables from away from congregate or group care and back into family settings. So I know that the two sort of ways of doing that is, one is through talking up and recruitment of kinship foster families. Another way is through recruiting foster families that are willing to take any age child, including teenagers. And a third option is also recruiting foster parents that are willing to have and need some additional services that come with that child to be sure that there's regular intervention for youth who need that in a home. So starting with the kinship caregivers, that is when a relative steps forward. And what has your experience been with family members who step up?
So I think two things. Oftentimes the public will say, well, why would you go to a family member if it was a family problem that brought a young person into the child welfare system? And I always say, and I coined it from a woman that worked at DCYF many years ago, she'd say that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree except in a hurricane. And when families experience challenges with substance abuse or mental health, that apple can roll far away from a tree. And oftentimes families become very disconnected from other family members who could help. Mm-hmm. And so it's not surprising that every living person has about 300 relatives, and the challenge is just finding those folks. Mm-hmm. So we've found that some of the same strategies that bill collectors can use to find people who are in debt work to find far-flung relatives who might be potential placement resources for children. And we're digging deeper. Historically, child welfare systems were really focused on maternal relatives. We're looking more deeply at paternal side resources, and we're helping more kids find family members. We're also doing more recruitment among the general community, putting out a call to action to get more people to step up and become foster parents. If they're nervous about becoming a foster parent for a teen, they can always become a mentor in our Real Connections program, be paired with a young person who's most in danger of aging out of foster care without permanent adult connections, and through a mentor relationship, develop a deeper bond with a young person to decide whether or not maybe they could be a placement resource for that young person. And then thirdly, we're trying to really increase the pool of existing foster parents and getting them to flex a little bit with some additional support to consider maybe getting outside their comfort zone and caring for a child who might be a little older than they had previously experienced.
You must meet so many champions, people who are ordinary citizens with huge hearts that decide that they can provide a home to a child or a young person for a particular amount of time. Oftentimes they don't know how long it's going to be. What are some of the stories you've seen of just incredible success in terms of people who step up to be foster parents saying, Lisa, I can't imagine that I might have missed this chance?
Absolutely. I was with a foster mom last week, and just an amazing woman who has taken in so many teens over the years, and it's changed her life. It's changed the life of these young people. She's become a grandma through the young people that she's fostered and adopted, and I think she couldn't imagine not doing it. And you know, our foster parents are heroes, but they're also just regular people. You know, people come up to them in the grocery store and say, wow, you know, you're so special that you do that. I think what's most important to realize is that the real gift is the kids. And, you know, I started as a mentor about 6.5 years ago to a young woman who was a junior in high school. And it was an hour a week, and it flew by. And next thing I knew, she was coming over after school to do her homework, and she was coming before school, and I was packing a lunch for her when I was, you know, packing a lunch for our boys. And she just fit in, you know, to some extent. There was a foster mom who wrote a book called Another Place at the Table, and that's kind of what it is. It's just making room for one more and doing the same things that you would do in your family on a Saturday or a Sunday or during the week, just allowing someone else to be a part of that. And, you know, we found with Bianca that she just became a part of our lives and eventually moved in with us and went off to college, and we've been able to see her through, and she graduated last year, and now she's volunteering volunteering and teaching and hopefully going to law school. And we've just gotten to tag along on her journey, and it's been such an incredible, exciting experience. So I would recommend mentoring or fostering to anyone.
So people who aren't quite ready to make the commitment and go to the formal training can step up and be a mentor and sort of try it on for size and see if it works. As you were telling the story, I think it's all of us who are parents remember those teen years. It's just roving hordes of kids anyway, going from house to house. It's I'm not saying that there's not many more incredibly important responsibilities that go with being a foster parent, but you say it so well. It's another seat at the table. It's another child that can feel safe in your home with so many rewards. And if people are viewing the show and know that there's all kinds of things that can happen in the lives of youth that have been in and out of the system, and if they worry about things like mental health treatment for young people who might need it, what would you say? What resources are available?
I would say that DCYF has supports and resources available. I've been really grateful to see the Governor Raimondo's administration come in, and we're looking to make some critical changes to make sure that the resources and supports are available for foster families in our state. Historically, we've been very reliant on group care. We've put a lot of financial investment in group care and a lot of resources there, and I'm starting to see that significant shift of resources and supports to foster families. We just had the first increase to foster care board rates in about 14 years.
And board rates, that means the amount of money per day per child, right?
Correct. So it's a reimbursement, and truly a partial reimbursement for the expenses that families incur caring for a child. And a few years ago, they took a look at that rate, and they determined that it was probably about 60% off the mark, and mark standing for minimum adequate rate for children, where they basically indexed what are the costs to provide food and clothing for children at different ages. And this increase was a pretty significant increase to get closer to what those actual costs are. Foster parents can be single or married. They can own their own home or rent. If they work full-time, there are daycare opportunities for children in foster care. So there's a lot of support available. We have support groups for foster parents out there. All young people in foster care have a health care plan through the state, so they have access to individual counseling services. We also have young people that, many sibling groups are taken into foster care. So we do need folks who are interested in stepping forward and maybe giving a home to a sibling group of 2 or 3. And sometimes those children get visitation together or group counseling together. So I wouldn't let those concerns hold somebody back from stepping forward. Visitation opportunities with the biological families. I mean, foster parents are partners. They work with a team. They work with the DCYF social worker. They work with, in some cases, the biological parents, and they're helping to support the well-being and health of the children.
And so in some cases, when you step up to be a foster parent for an older child, say a high school age child, there are circumstances where that child or youth goes back to their biological family. Are foster parents given notice that that's about to happen and kind of kept in the loop just emotionally?
Yes. However, sometimes decisions get made by a judge, split-second decision in court, and folks aren't always prepared. So that does happen. We have to remember that the biological parents are going through a process. They have a plan in place, and if they meet the terms of that plan, a judge could make a decision. And sometimes people are caught off guard with that, and it can be difficult to be a foster parent. We see a lot of foster families that'll have an abrupt reunification of a child that might have been with them for a year or more, and it's tough. You give your heart. You love a child like your own, and you know that you've given them a solid foundation, particularly for the young children. I mean, when we think about so much brain development that happens between birth and age 6, and for foster parents to be able to be a part of that, and for adolescents, there's another wave of brain development. Whatever the time that a foster parent is with a child, it will have a lasting impact. But sometimes the circumstances of when it starts and when it ends are out of our control and are really part of the larger system, and that can be frustrating.
Well, another thing that I think people who are watching the system, first of all, I know you have stepped up to a lot of leadership in working with the Department for Children, Youth, and Families under the leadership of Jamia McDonald, to really look at the whole aspect of foster care and how do we support our foster families in a really great way. And I know that a lot of changes are happening at the department. There's a lot of great people working there at all levels of the department trying to make sure that the children in the care of DCYF have the best possible outcomes. I know that people, they get concerned about child safety, as we all should. That's got to be at the epicenter of what the department does. How are foster parents, whether they're kinship parents or relative foster parents or other foster parents, found to be appropriate places for children to be?
How are they found?
In other words, I know that there have been some things in the news about licensing of foster homes.
Oh, okay.
And there's a lot of backlog that is right now being caught up on as a key priority for kinship foster homes. And that involves a whole process of licensing kinship foster homes where there's 6 months to do that, and there's an initial check on appropriateness. How about for foster families that step up? How does the department deem them appropriate foster families, and what does your agency do with that process, if anything?
Sure. So I think in the case of non-relative caregivers, every aspect of vetting that foster parent in their home happens before a placement with a child ever begins. But the process is laborious, and it is challenging, particularly for relative caregivers, because they might be called into service at 11 o'clock at night and not be prepared to take a child into their home. So Foster Forward provides cribs and beds for relative caregivers who are called into service to assist them. But one of the challenges that I think has contributed to the licensing backlog that you've mentioned is that there are home specifications that need to be ensured. So lead safety checks and checks in terms of a fire inspection. And sometimes just a minor glitch will hold a home back from achieving full licensure status. And if the kinship caregiver is renting in an apartment and they're trying to get a hold of a landlord and try to make those changes, sometimes that can can slow down the process and contribute. And I think what got put forth as a safety issue to the public, that the thing we probably want to look more closely at is, do we have an adequate workforce of frontline workers that are able to visit with children every single month and see them every single month? Are caseloads low enough so that workers are able to do that efficiently? Do workers have the technology that they need? There's been a lot of talk about the mobility of the workforce of child welfare workers and the highly immobile system that they work under. And so this new pilot that they have with iPads that workers can take out into the field with them when they're working with children and doing visits and in court will be an important step in supporting that workforce to meet all of the safety parameters of this work. Because I think the licensing piece is really only one dimension of that.
Well, to change topics as our time is going rapidly by, let's talk about youth aging out of foster care. You have been a tremendous leader on that topic. Unfortunately, a few years ago, Rhode Island rolled back its age of a child that it provides services to, where now basically services end at 18, except for the YES program, which provides some level of service for some targeted group of those children. Any of us who've raised children know that at 18, even in the best of circumstances, it's very hard to be out on your own without some support. Why have you invested so much of your advocacy in this issue, and what do you think are the next steps?
So I think that if we want a good system, if we want children to be healthy and successful, and for young people to make successful transitions to adulthood, we need to have the right policies in place to support that. There are 22 states in the country that have extended foster care to age 21. Over the last decade, we've learned so much more about the impact of trauma on the developing brain. We know so much more about adolescent brain development. And essentially, we know now that it's impossible for an 18-year-old to developmentally do some of the things that we expect them to do at 18 on their own, emancipated from foster care, to find a job, be completely self-sustaining, continue with education, even finishing high school or going on to college, and that extending care and allowing young people to have a couple of more years of critical support when they need it is just an important prerequisite to help young people be more successful.
And so in terms of what you're doing in the here and now, I'm sure that you as well as leaders in the Department of Children and Families are looking out for those young people that are nearing their 18th birthday and doing the best possible job you can to try to patch together some level of support as they go on their own. What about a foster parent that still very much cares about that child? Do some of them continue providing care, or is that kind of an abrupt end at 18?
So we have an Aftercare Program in Rhode Island. It was instituted in 2007 when we did lower the age from 21 down to 18. And I would say that that program has been widely successful. I'd say about 70% of the kids that we're serving in that program have been able to make that jump to adulthood and take advantage of the resources and supports. If they were living with a foster parent when they turned 18, they've been able to elect to continue to stay with them, and that family's provided them some additional support as they transition. Most of those young people coming into the Aftercare Program are leaving group care, so they're finding an apartment in the community. Many of them are alone in that apartment. I mean, most 18-year-olds that we know are going off to college. Many of them are still staying at home with their parents. We're seeing young adults today stay at home till about 24, 25. So in many ways, aftercare isn't really a normal transition for young people. So I think, the agency that I run runs the Aftercare Program, and like I said, I think about 70% of the kids are doing great. We've got about 30% of the kids, and they tend to be the young mothers and the parents who are really struggling to do that, make that successful transition and care while they're caring for their children and figuring out daycare. And some of the young people that have experienced more juvenile justice challenges, are really need a little more support. So I think it's about having the right policy and really developing a continuum so that young people that have those foster parent supports, they can continue to have those supports. If young people are not going to be reunified, really helping them get to legal permanence. I mentioned Bianca before. We're actually going to legally adopt her as an adult. Kids never outgrow the need for a family, and we shouldn't stop trying just because they've reached a certain expiration date. And everybody someday will walk down an aisle, or they'll experience tremendous joys and tremendous sorrows in life, and that's when we turn to family. And it's not fair. We haven't gotten the job done if we don't ensure that every young person that has experienced the child welfare system really has a support network that they can rely on.
Well, that is a great example of what happens when you open your family and your home to more love and more of a connection, and that's wonderful news about the plan for Bianca and your family. And for viewers that are watching that are thinking about jumping in and stepping up, obviously everyone knows you don't know what's going to happen. There can be tremendous both joy and sadness in a positive reunification, which of course foster families want for their young people that they've fostered. And then there can also be situations where it might develop, as is in your case, to a situation where they might adopt the young person. And then there's a lot of other supports. I know that you work closely with Adoption Rhode Island and Darlene Allen, and every year at the State House there's an amazing showcase of the young people that are waiting to be adopted in our state of all ages and some sibling groups. So Lisa, for viewers that are watching and who've been moved by this program, and we thank you for sharing your personal story as well, where should they call to get a hold of you and your organization, which again is Foster Forward, and this is Lisa Galette, who is the Executive Director of Foster Forward.
Absolutely. They can contact us at Foster Forward 401-438-3900, or they could visit our website at fosterforward.net. If they're interested in adoption, I'd encourage them to go to Adoption RI's website. There is a heart gallery with photos of young people who are legally free for adoption. And on our website at fosterforward.net, they can get more information about becoming a foster parent or becoming a Real Connections mentor for a teen in care.
And as we close out, just a few concluding thoughts about what your hopes are for the future. DCYF is under the microscope right now. It's a very hard agency to run, and yet, as we've said, there are incredible people there working every day on the front lines. Jamie McDonald is the new director, who has a real vision and support from the governor for really changing the focus of the system from congregate care over to family settings, because every kid needs a family and a place to call home. What's your sort of sense of barometer on how things are going in the next few years?
I think we'll continue on a positive course, and I'm hoping that we will be able to realize tremendous savings when we get more young people to family-based care and out-of-group care, and be able to reinvest some of those savings into more prevention services, because we still have young people who come into foster care, and if we had more supports for their families in the community, they might not have to come into foster care. So I see us over the next 5 years getting better and better at this work, and really doing more to put families in the driver's seat, listen to their voice in the process, really listen to the voices of the young people that we're caring for, because I think they're really the key to moving the system forward.
And I thank you for ending on that note, because the focus really needs to be on prevention. How can everyone get involved earlier? How can families have the support they need so that some of these issues don't happen that require the involvement of DCYF in the first place? So what I want to do right now, Lisa, is thank you. Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for the incredible hard work that you and your staff do every day to make it possible for so many families to step up and become foster families. Do you have a last word before we close?
No, I just think we're going to get to a place where all children can thrive, and I think that's what Kids Count does. You give us that check every year on where the numbers are, and we can benchmark and we can continue to improve, but let's make sure that our state is one that protects all of our children and gives them a family. Every child does deserve a family.
And Lisa, your phone number one more time?
401-438-3900.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. Lisa Galette is the Executive Director of Foster Forward. My name is Elizabeth Burke Bryant. I am Executive Director of Rhode Island Kids Count. It has been a pleasure to bring you this show, Access Rhode Island. For more information on becoming a foster parent, please reach out to Foster Forward and Lisa Galette. Thank you so much for joining us for today's program, and we look forward to joining you another time for another Access Rhode Island program called Rhode Island Kids Count. Thanks for joining us.